O God, who I praise, do not remain silent, for wicked and deceitful men have opened their mouths against me. They have spoken against me with lying tongues, with words of hatred they surround me. They attack me without cause. In return for my friendship they accuse me, but I am a man of prayer. They repay me evil for good, and hatred for my friendship. Appoint an evil man to oppose him. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is tried, let him be found guilty, and may his prayers condemn him. May his days be few, may another take his place of leadership. May his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. May his children be wandering beggars, may they be driven from their ruined homes. May a creditor seize all he has, may strangers plunder the fruits of his labour. May no one extend kindness to him or take pity on his fatherless children. May his descendants be cut off, their names blotted out from the next generation. May the iniquity of his fathers be remembered before the Lord. May the sin of his mother never be blotted out. May their sins always remain before the Lord, that he may cut off the memory of them from earth. For he never thought of doing a kindness. He hounded to death the poor, and the needy and the broken-hearted. He loved to pronounce a curse. May it come on him. He found no pleasure in blessing. May it be far from him. He wore cursing as his garments. He entered it into his body like water, into his bones like oil. May it be like a cloak wrapped around him, like a belt tied forever round him. May this be the Lord's payment to my accusers, to those who speak evil of me. But you, O sovereign Lord, deal well with me for your name's sake. Out of the goodness of your love, deliver me. For I am poor and needy, and my heart is wounded within me. I fade away like an evening shadow. I am shaken off like a locust. My knees give way from fasting. My body is thin and gaunt. I am an object of scorn to my accusers. When they see me, they shake their heads. Help me, O Lord my God. Save me in accordance with your love. Let them know that it is your hand, that you, O Lord, have done it. That you, O Lord, have done it. They may curse, but you will bless. When they attack, they will be put to shame, but your servant will rejoice. My accusers will be clothed with disgrace and wrapped in shame as in the cloak. With my mouth I will greatly extol the Lord. In the great throng I will praise him, for he stands at the right hand of the needy one, to save his life from those who condemn him. Another night of tossing and turning and being unable to sleep. I don't know if you've ever had nights like this. I do. And it's amazing to think how such an insignificant thing could really trigger such a night of tossing and turning. Whether it's someone cutting you up in the car, a fit of road rage. Whether it's that somebody says something to you or someone slights you in some way, but you don't get that right of reply to put your story or your side of the story across. For those of you who have listened to or watched the Inside Out film, you will see examples of anger, including moving house, examples of anger being angry at other drivers, stomping upstairs in a fit of anger, going to a new school and being angry about that, having your old friends getting new best friends, and being angry at that, going to a hockey match and it not being the same as it was at your old place and being angry at that. And my personal favourite was that Riley's mum was talking to Riley about how she was and why she was struggling. And then Riley's mum getting angry with Riley's dad because in the middle of this conversation, Riley's dad was just thinking about the football. That never happens here before you say anything. And what triggers anger will differ in each of us. We all get angry about different things. But the way it is expressed is also different in each of us. Some of us might fly into a fit of rage. Some of us might go silent. Some of us might slam doors. Some of us might go stomping around. Some of us might go binging on food or drink or things that we shouldn't do. With me, it's often an ability to sleep, which is why I'm here now. I lay at night sometimes if I'm angry, and you'd think by now that I would perhaps have remembered that line from Ephesians 4 about never letting the sun go down when you're angry. You may recognise some of these responses in yourself. A few months ago I met Stuart Pearce, who was a former captain of Nottingham Forest Football Club and a former left back for England. And someone once said of Stuart Pearce that he never smiled, and even when he scored he looked angry. But as Christians, as people that say that we are disciples of Jesus Christ, as people who seek to live the way he would have us live, what does it mean for us on these occasions when we are angry? How should we respond? In retrospect, of course, it's often easier to go back and see what was going on in our mind and what we were thinking about. But what about now? What about in that moment of anger now, that moment that you are living in at that precise and at this precise moment? What about now? And David wrote this psalm, Psalm 109, when his life was in danger. And I wonder if you read Psalm 109 to yourself, if you see a cycle of anger that you may be able to relate to. First of all, David was raging that someone had done something or said something to him or about him. He says in the first 5 verses that wicked and deceitful men had opened their mouths against him. People had lied against him. People had said words of hatred against him. People accused him of things. People repaid him for evil when he had done good, and they gave him hatred when he only gave them friendship. We can get angry at lots of things, can't we? We get angry about children going to school on an empty stomach. We get angry about the flight of refugees in refugee camps around the world. We get angry about the misuse of resources in our world. We might get angry about a policy decision taken by a government, taken by our place of work, or even by our church. But this anger that David talks about in Psalm 109, this anger is personal. This anger is against him as an individual. This is an anger that goes straight to his heart. It's an anger which is stirring up within him. And it's about him. And this anger is personal. And we can share this anger, can't we? We can talk to friends. We can offload on people. A problem shared is a problem halved. But of course, that won't get rid of the anger, because that anger is still there, and it's the anger that's about us. And so we're raging, aren't we, first of all? And then once we rage, I don't know about you, but sometimes we go down the plotting of revenge. And if you're looking from verses 6 through to about 15, we see the type of revenge that David is plotting. He wants a creditor to seize all that his accuser has. He wants no one to take pity on his accuser. He wants his accuser's descendants to be cut off. He wants his children to be fatherless. He wants his wife to be a widow. In other words, he's saying, I wish this person were dead. This is extreme. This is extreme anger and the plotting and the thinking of revenge. And I wonder if you can think back to times where you've wished for some type of retribution for someone who's made you angry. But often when we come through this particular part of the cycle, when we get through revenge, we start rationalising it to ourselves, because we realise what we're thinking, what we're saying. So we rationalise it, and I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with yourself late at night. Somebody has slighted you, somebody has wronged you. And so you start having a conversation with yourself about the next time you see this person. This is how the conversation will go. And you come up with the correct comebacks. You come up with the witty ripostes. You come up with exactly the right comebacks when those comebacks are needed. And this conversation ends with the other person, usually with their back against the wall, sobbing, and then they end up on their knees begging for your forgiveness. You rationalise, and we rationalise in our head why it is we're thinking this, why it is we're angry. And in the psalm, David rationalises what's going on. He says that the accuser never thought of doing a kindness. The accuser hounded the poor to death. The accuser loved to pronounce curses. The accuser loved and found no pleasure in blessing. Once we get through the rage, once we get through the revenge, once we get through the rationalising of it, we then perhaps come to a stage where we begin to realise the effect it is having on us. In the cold night of day, in the cold light of day, we see what was happening in our heads and in our hearts. At work, I work in a university, and I would always say to students, if they're writing a piece of coursework, don't leave it to the last minute, don't submit it on the deadline, try and write it a few days before, and then leave it for a couple of days and then come back to it. Because that little gap in between that moment you complete a piece of coursework and submitting it, that moment you finish it, you think it's the best piece of work ever. You think it's publishable, you think it's worth a first, you think it's fantastic. But come back to it a couple of days later in the cold light of day. You can be more objective and you can see it for what it is. You're less emotionally attached to it. And after a time, David begins to see what effect this anger is having on him. He recognises that he's poor and needy. He recognises that his heart is wounded. He recognises the powerful imagery of being shaken off like a locust. His body is thin and he's gaunt. How often when we're angry do we go off our food and we can't eat? But it's only once we begin to realise the effect that it's having on us do we perhaps recognise that we need to lift the matter to God. And it's only towards the end of the psalm that David recognises this and starts asking for God's help and for God to be involved in the situation. And of course, when I talk about anger, it is a case of when and not if. Simply by being a Christian, that doesn't make us immune to anger. The opening line of this psalm, "O God, whom I praise." This is a chap who was in tune with God, who wanted to live and walk with God. But then the next 20 or so verses are just a fit of anger. So I can't say, don't be angry. That's a stupid thing, an unhelpful thing to say. In Ephesians 4, it says, in your anger, do not sin. Anger will happen, and anger is a part of life and has a place in life. Because anger is indeed a positive emotion. Because being angry shows that we care. Martin Luther King said that our lives begin to end the moment we become silent about what matters. Because anger reveals in us that deep pursuit for justice. Jesus was angry. You would have read occasions in the Bible where it says Jesus was angry, but alongside that anger, there was compassion. In Mark chapter 1, he felt compassion for a man with leprosy, but at the same time felt anger about the way society treated this man. In Mark 10, we read that Jesus was indignant that he wouldn't let the little children come to him because he had compassion for the children. And I wonder if rather than beating ourselves up for being angry about something, which would do none of us any good at all, we perhaps need to ask ourselves a different question as we explore ourselves our response to being angry. The Bible is littered with occasions of people who were angry. In the prodigal son, you had the older son who was so angry he didn't want to come inside for the party. In 1 Samuel 18, we have that Saul was angry with David because David did so much better than Saul on the battlefield, and people knew it. We know about the account of Jonah, who after being confined in a fish for a number of days was spat out, and he became angry. He became angry about a withered plant, but angry also, it seems, that God's love extends to the most wicked of arenas. But perhaps the narrative right at the beginning of the Bible is helpful and provides the question that we should be asking ourselves. The story of Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel both make an offering to God. Abel's was accepted. Cain's was rejected. In Genesis chapter 4, God says to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why are you angry?" And instead of drilling down and looking at himself and looking at his heart, he took his brother Abel out into the fields and he killed him. Why are we angry? What is it that makes us angry? And maybe this is the question that's helpful to us to consider as we look at this emotion of anger. Because anger is inevitable. Don't kid yourself that you are immune to anger. I will have more sleepless nights. Other people will have occasions where they slam doors, where they make catty comments, where they fly into a fit of rage, where people snap at those around them. But perhaps it's helpful. Perhaps it's helpful to notice the cycle of anger, to notice the initial rage when we are angry. And then once we have that anger and we have that rage, we start to plot the revenge in our head about what we want, how we want to get this accuser back. And when with this revenge, we often rationalise. We say what it is or why it is we want to do something. But then also we begin to maybe realise the effect that it's having on us. And then when we get through those stages, perhaps we begin to recognise that the best thing that we can do is to lift it to God, and recognising that that is what we can do. But once we're through that process of anger, or maybe even if you're able to do it during that place of anger, ask the question, why are you angry? Why are you angry? What is it that you want? Is it justice? Is it demonstrating that you're caring about something? Or is it revenge? Is it vengeance? And I wonder if using this anger of emotion and reflecting on us and why we are angry at any given time might be helpful to us as we seek to become more aligned to the person and to the people that God would have us be. So I'm going to try and go to sleep again. I've got my teddy. I've got my hot chocolate. Hopefully now I can have a good night's sleep. Good night. God bless.